Started. Thank you all for coming. I know you have many choices here today. I think we'll close the door. Before the queering of America, gay characters played three predictable roles in mainstream entertainment. In dramatic stories, they were either the villain or the victim. In comedies, they were the butt of the joke. Perhaps this is why, at the dawn of gay comics, the content was either overtly political or overtly sexual, but hardly ever funny. This panel will attempt to trace the evolution of humor in comics created by queers and for queers from Miss Thing in the 1960s to the present. How has the nature of queer humor changed over time? Did the internalized homophobia and self-loathing of the past inform queer humor in a way that has gone the way of the disco ball? If so, how has the mainstreaming of queer culture impacted what we call funny, or the situations we can now explore through humor? Let's ask our panelists. Lee Mars, a 1982 Inkpot Award winner, is best known for her comic book series, The Further Fattening Adventures of Pudge Girl Blimp. Mars was one of the founding mommies of the Women's Comics Collective, as well as gay comics. While working in mainstream comics, she scripted for Batman, Wonder Woman, and Indiana Jones. Kurt Erichsen wrote and drew Murphy's Manor, a comic strip syndicated to local gay newspapers from 1980 to 2008. The strip was recognized with awards for the Gay and Lesbian Press Association in 1985 and 1988. In the 1980s, his work also appeared in gay comics, featuring several Sparkle Spinsters stories. In the 1990s to the 2000s, Kurt drew a series of original stories for the Meat Men books, and half of the book Between the Sheets with Bruce Billings. Also in the 2000s, Kurt drew a series of illustrations for Instinct magazine. In 2002, Kurt's artwork for SF Fandom was recognized with the Rotzler Award. Roberta Gregory began publishing LGBT comics in 1974, with appearances in women's comics and her own Dynamite Damsels soon after. Her stories appeared in almost every issue of gay comics through the 1980s, and she published Winging It and Artistic Licentiousness through the 1990s. Fantagraphics published 40 issues of Gregory's Naughty Bits, featuring the iconic Bitchy Bitch. And she's still at it. Oh, and did we mention her birthday was yesterday?
Happy birthday! Yay! What a great gift.
Sean Martin started Doc and Raider in 1987 in Vancouver, British Columbia, and was quickly picked up by others across Canada, then internationally. The strip went digital in 2003 and has reached its 3,000th online episode. The first 2 years' worth of panels is housed at the National Archives of Canada, while the remainder of the hand-drawn ones are at the Pride Archive at the University of Western Ontario. Sean's characters have represented Canada around the world, supporting everything from a New Zealand AIDS hospice to a Scottish queer arts festival. Finally, Greg Fox is the artist and writer of the comic strip Kyle's Bed and Breakfast, currently syndicated to a variety of LGBT publications across North America. Greg has published 3 collections of Kyle's Bed and Breakfast, the first of which was a Lambda Literary Award finalist for Best Humor Book of the Year. He currently resides in Northport, Long Island, New York, and is working on the 4th collection of Kyle's Bed and Breakfast to be published later this year. And I'm Jeff Krell, the creator of Jason, which launched in the Philadelphia Gay News in 1982, was picked up by Gay Comics a few years later, with issue 6, ran in there for a long time, as well as in Meat Men through about 20 volumes. I self-syndicated it for a while, and since 2005, I've been self-publishing original graphic novels. Welcome our panelists. Each of our panelists has prepared a slideshow to illustrate how they view humor and how that's changed in their work over time. And we're going to start with Lee Mars and work our way down.
Can I just say, is the disco ball really dead?
Wait a minute.
It's made a comeback.
Yeah. It was, That never goes out of style.
There you go.
Okay. Good morning, hearty souls.
Good morning.
I figured there was probably too much liveliness until too late last night, so glad to see you here today. I've done several kinds of humor, starting when I was in grammar school. And by the time I reached junior high school, I learned that things that were expressed that could get some people expelled, if you did them in cartoons, you would get awards. So I figured, forget essays, forget being serious. A better way to go is to be silly. And this has been my lifelong credo. I'll talk about the most famous, I guess, Pudge Girl Blimp. These were 3 series starting in actually 1972. This is the story, the long-running story of a teenage runaway in San Francisco. It's kind of like Candide. Her aim is to get laid. And, philosophy is not one of her strong points. So these are parodies, but they're all based on true stories. All of my friends, of course, we exchange stories. So I twisted those into stories that happened about Pudge. And considering her personality, the stories altered. I know probably it's true of everybody here in the panel. You create a character or a couple of characters, and then their personality takes over. There are things that you want them to do, but their personality dictates that they're going to do something else. So it was kind of like listening to her personality in my head that made for her various adventures. There were a few manifestations of things for queer women before that, but this is one of the first appearances. She belongs to a women's group, and a few of the women in the group are gay. And so Jane is coming on to her. But of course, she's completely clueless. And at this point, she's still a virgin. And then there were gay marches in those days, coast to coast. And this is one that appeared in, I think, Pudge number 2. And there were all kinds of manifestations. For instance, obviously, by the comments of the 2 cops, they're probably gay as well. So, a riot ensues as the basis of this. With number 3, Pudge finally gets laid, but it's a girl. So Jane has been successful, persevering, and so she's really into it. But actually, later on, she lays a guy, and she's actually more interested in food than anything else. Other stories that I did for gay comics have to do with the stereotypes She's in college. This is another character. She gets in college and is getting it on with her roommate, and these are kind of self stories. And in those days, this was like 1963 to 1967. There was nothing. Gay guys got at least some publicity, however negative, but lesbians, we didn't know. So she turns out to be bisexual. She never knows which way things are going to go, so she finally settles on Angel, and Angel, of course, lays anything that moves. So she has to deal with that, and so she breaks up with Angel because Angel goes off with somebody else permanently to South America, which is where people go. And then, so then she finally runs across somebody who is as wishy-washy as she is, and spends quite some time trying to get up the courage to declare herself. And she finally does. And then they go through the process that everybody who's gotten involved with anybody does, but they're all domestic things. Can you repair cars? Yes. Can you do tax accounting? Yes, blah, blah, blah. So these are the important romantic aspects of things together. So I kind of did a blend of self-revelatory stories and parodies. This is also a it's what was going on in the time. In San Francisco, more or less, gay life in San Francisco was dominated by guys. And for some reason, the East Bay had all the lesbians. And it seemed like every party you went to, every meeting you went to, every Starbucks you went to, you would meet somebody and they were connected to somebody else you knew, or maybe 3 or 4 other people you knew. And so various friends of mine would say, oh, I met this wonderful woman, but it turns out she's Lois's ex, and it was all complicated. So this story, this is a new person to the Bay Area, and so because I was freelancing as an instructor these days, charts and graphs were in my mind. So this. The connections are beginning. So finally, after all this convoluted, it's just, so finally she encounters this other lady who's also originally from someplace else, and she thinks, wow, at last. And then it turns out they come from the same hometown, and they even used to, anyway. So, but it's a happy ending because they're predicting the future together. The other thing I did, this was also for gay comics, were parodies. This is a Jane Eyre parody, but with lesbians. And it's about somebody, a young woman coming to this castle. She's an architectural photographer. She's supposed to take pictures of the whole thing. And then she meets, the owner of the manor. And and I don't know if you remember Jane Eyre or any of the Gothic romance stories historically, but the guy in those straight stories is actually a sociopath. And so I made the woman who owned the owner a crazy person. So so they get involved, and finally she discovers the killer is the owner. And because real estate was high in those days, she gets rid of the owner and takes over the real estate herself with condominiums. Other parodies involve the work that I've done in movies. Gave me some information about stunt people and such. So this is a I love crowd scenes, as you can tell. So there are many points that can be made at the same time, either amusing or informative if you do a crowd scene. So what and even on to today, there are not many stories about older people. I've discovered now I'm an old person. I just discovered this a few days ago. It was like such a surprise. So I'm doing stories that involve if you're gay and you're ancient. This is about a couple who, you know, they don't march anymore because of arthritis and blah blah blah. And one, as you can see, one of the couple is irate about everything, and the other one is more mellow. And the irate person is declaring how the young people today don't do, you know, they're not into any of the causes, they don't blah, 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 blah. And then everybody and their cousin begins to come to the door fundraising for all kinds of causes. And of course they end up being a bank for all these people, handing out the checks. So I think, at least in the underground, you can create anything you want. So I've used that my whole career to express whatever I saw around me. And because people will remember something if it's humorous, and however serious the subject matter, if it's humorous, they'll remember what you've said or what the subject matter is. This works in editorial cartoons, it works in everything. So I think humor is the way to present truth with a spoonful of sugar so that you can express anything you want to and have people remember and not get indicted. So
thank you. I think since we have a lot of time, which is a luxury we don't usually afford, when each panelist is finished with his or her presentation, we can open it up to questions before we move on to the next panelist. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Lee Mars?
Do you feel like your humor has changed over the years?
No. As far as comics are concerned, it's still as really violent as ever. I do, at Christmas time, I create often a cartoon that addresses what's been happening this last year. So I've addressed the Iraq War when it was just first starting, Homeland Security, Ferguson. These have all been subject matters. So I haven't mellowed in that sense. It's people will be afraid because I think that they're imagining folks that they know seeing whatever they're creating, and actually it doesn't matter to most people. You can tell somebody, even a friend of yours, various intimate things that are so important to you, and about 2 months later, they just don't remember them because everybody is the lead in their own movie. And so you don't have to be afraid, I think.
All right, next up is Kurt Erichsen, creator of Murphy's Manor. Can we give you some help? Got it.
Planning for this presentation, I kind of latched onto the word evolution. And it occurred to me that the community has changed a great deal over the past 35 years, and our cartoons reflect those changes. Most of the time I've found myself drawing what I see based on the people that I know, and sometimes looking back I found that I was drawing trends that I didn't even recognize at the time, but I managed to pick up on them by accident. So Murphy's Manor is a syndicated strip that I did for a number of years to local papers. Here we have Murphy living the gay lifestyle, calling for his sodium bicarbonate. He and his partner, Mark, planned their political protests, political activism, but it gets in the way of their haircuts. Murph is very stylish, as all gay men are, and look good in anything that they wear. And they eat like gourmets. A special gay meatloaf. In all, I drew 1,183 of these comic strips about community, sex, and politics. Remember that I was 27 at the start and 54 at the end. In that time, the same issues very often occurred repeatedly, and as time changed, I found myself dealing with them differently. The strip is about Mark Verity and Murphy Robinson. They share their large house with roommates. It becomes kind of a gay Grand Central Station. I'm going to present a few of the cartoons. I'm starting to repeat myself here. I'm getting off script, sorry. You're not really a daddy unless you're a baby. Back in the beginning, when I started drawing these, camp was more a thing of the 60s and 70s and the 80s. In the late 70s, I moved to Toledo, Ohio, and came out and encountered a lot of camp, people camping it up. That was just how the gay society was at the time. And I reflected that in some of my early cartoons. Here, Duchess is saying, honest, I don't know how I put up with you two queens. What's the matter with him? Oh, she just needs to get laid.
Yeah.
With the switching of pronouns, but there were, not everybody in the community, but certain gay men like to take on female persona, or you were either Butch or you were Nellie, and that was the source of a lot of humor at the time. That was really a different world at the time. But small talk, even at coffee clutches, were very overtly sexual, talking rather as we would today about the weather. In 1981, we were gay men and women, and guys called each other girlfriend, who I guess some people still do. Today we're LGBTQ, and I'm probably missing a few acronyms.
Yeah, right.
Here, one of the later strips, Jerry, a gay teenager, is talking to his dad over cereal. Jerry, are you queer? Dad, you know I'm gay. I know you're homosexual. That's a clinical condition. If they can cure smallpox, they can cure that. But I've seen you be gay. That means getting political. So what does queer mean? It means you enjoy it. My And civil rights. I've thought more than once if I could rename the comic strip, I probably would have called it Weekend Revolutionaries, because it was how ordinary gays took pride into their own hands. This rather autobiographical strip, Andrew does a bar run in support of a gay rights ordinance. And so he goes around the bar passing out pamphlets and tries to get barflies interested in politics. And the response that he gets is a swift kiss on the lips. Who says the community isn't supportive? In a fairly early episode, Meg O'Keefe is another weekend revolutionary who takes activists and politics into her own hands by running for mayor. Here she has a press conference where only one reporter shows up, and it's a reporter from a suburban shopper weekly newspaper. And we learned that Meg is running on the lesbian martyr ticket. The reporter only has one question: what's a lesbian?
It's going to be a long
And I need to add in conclusion to that Meg wins the election.
All right.
Another true story. Mark and Murph in bed. Great newspaper article, Mark. Imagine them quoting you about gay rights. Nobody in your office even knew you were gay, but they all will tomorrow morning. Well, good night. By the way, you're not still worried about coming out in such a public way, are you? True story. I got nothing but support from my colleagues, I'm happy to say. The byline to this strip should really read Antonin Scalia and Kurt Erichsen, because he wrote all of the dialogue. Justice Scalia is inspecting our homosexual agendas, reaching into his pants. Disgusting. He can tell who's violated majoritarian sexual morality. You've been a bad lad. It's the duty of the state to keep the opprobrium traditionally attached to homosexual conduct. Oh my, you didn't. What would we do without him to safeguard our morals? You're a virgin, aren't you? In relationships, our attitudes have changed quite a lot over the years. In this strip, fairly early strip, Jeff, the eternal party boy, meets Duval Capet III, better known as the Duchess. Everybody says I should talk to you about advice in finding a lover. Well, Jeffrey, you've come to the expert on lovers, because I've had dozens of them. Above all, you must bear in mind that love is not all sex. And honey, that's the whole problem with it. By 2004, relationships had progressed to the point of bringing children into the strips. We had discovered family values. Meg, still the mayor, gets to play babysitter. Marky's bedtime is 7 o'clock. We're reading him The Boy Who Danced with Dolls. I'm reading it. He's getting big. Does he know he's in an alternative household? Mom and Aunt Paige are dykes. A gay household is no different in most ways. I can read. All right, honey, say your ABCs for Meg. Why? Of course, he learned it in a different order. AIDS was one of those issues that had to be confronted even in a humorous strip. When you think about it, what great material for a cartoonist. My close friends are dying, and my job is to find humor in it. But eventually I did start doing some AIDS strips, and as a matter of fact, I did quite a lot of them in the end. Here, Sid on the right talks about his experiences. The Saturday Night Orgy Group isn't what it used to be. We discuss books, analyze operas, trade recipes. We work on our knitting, but we never share needles. Well, it's good to find things to do together. Sex isn't worth dying for. Yeah, it does keep my mind off sex, and there he is knitting a jockstrap. A personal note here is that Sid on the right, although he doesn't look a bit like him, was based on Toledo's first AIDS victim, and I like to think that he would have been an activist had he not succumbed early in the struggle. Today, children, we're going to learn about AIDS, a terrible disease. There's no cure, so you must learn to protect yourselves. You only catch AIDS by sticking needles into your arm or doing adult naughty things. So if you ever want to do something naughty, don't. Mrs. Fisher, I have a question. Yes, Tommy. Is rimming safe if you wear a condom on your tongue?
Look at her face.
I have nothing to add to that one. A standard foil throughout the whole series, since we had gotten used to having the religious right as our adversaries, I cast the Reverend Ezekiel Hazenflue of the God and Country teleministry as an ongoing foil, and here he is working with high-tech condoms. When the condom expands, it sends a GPS signal to my computer and loads the address database. I know when and where you're doing it. That was great! Let's do it again! It is a loudspeaker, too. The gay marriage came to the fore towards the end of really the Murphy's Manor run, but as early as 1992, I did my first gay marriage strip, and I don't know how this happened, but somehow it occurred to me that the Ohio Revised Code was actually generally gender neutral, so technically gay marriage should have been legal in Ohio, which of course led to the constitutional amendment against it. Now look, we're both male persons over 18 years. We both qualify to marry. I don't think the people at the License Bureau would see it that way. Meg said that if we could get a license, she'd perform the ceremony. There must be a way. Of course. Here's our license. Let's go. I can't wait for the wedding night. I'll give you a lube job and rotate your tires. What was it that really bugged Straits about gay marriage? This cartoon is do it in polite love and to honor. It's simply disgusting. Some things belong behind closed doors, in sickness and health. Outrageous, perverted. You can't show it on network TV. They show straights doing it. Yuck! I now pronounce you
Married.
married. One of the last series was kind of a roadshow that I did for Murph, in which Mark and Murph again take activism into their own hands and embark on a tour of gay positive states to get married in as many places as legally possible. At the time, there were 6 states and a handful of maverick city mayors where you could get legally married around the country. They strike out in San Francisco, so they decide to try Portland, Oregon. It's only 600 and some miles. I feel like we're globe-trotting for the best view of a total eclipse. No, we're chasing equal rights, which is even rarer. I had fun with some photos here. Back home, even Jeff the party boy finds it's a different world because of gay marriage. Didn't they just get married? That was Ontario. This time it's Oregon. About time gay people had full equality before the law. So, how'd you like to spend the night with me? Not without a wedding ring, Buster. Maybe you prefer a little less equality? On Saturday night, anyway. And shortly thereafter, Mark's homophobic nephew knocks on the door. I hear you and your fruit boyfriend got hitched, but we're a good, solid Christian family, so I'm bringing wedding presents. Instant rice because it'll never last. An electric can opener because you're a lousy cook. For your honeymoon, a week at the I'm Not Gay Reformatory in Lynchburg, Virginia. A set of goblets, plastic goblets that almost look like real crystal. A pair of women's panties in your size. 1,000 thanks. Gives you a swift boot. Which is appropriate because this is also Murphy's Manor strip number 1000. Don't ask, don't tell was an issue that I got a lot of mileage out of. I did a surprising number of strips on that subject. I never thought that I'd be doing policy would last that long, but it was great fodder for cartoons. General Zitt talks with Andrew, who's gay, and they are enlisting and go visit colleges, find sturdy young men with broad shoulders, bulging biceps, taut pecs, and rippling abs, and erect nipples. Gays want exactly the same kind of men as the Army does. Sign them up. Sorry, not the nipples. Gays are great recruiters. Nice work if you can get it, sir. Then at the barracks, Andrew gets an unexpected reception, gets snapped by a towel. Aha, look at the fag jump. What's the matter, soldier? Can't take it? Do you see his little noodle? My girlfriend's bigger than that. Boy, am I glad these guys are straight. Hey, Tinky Winky, you dropped your soap. After 27 years of drawing this strip and all the changes that came about in the community, I have to muse that the fundamentals still apply. I never did tire of drawing Jeff the party boy in his Speedos. Thank you.
Comments for Kurt?
What was the reception that you got from the world of these cartoons?
These cartoons?
I mean,
Fan mail? Not much.
well, like in the women's panel, they talked about hate mail.
I got a off-the-wall letter from an inmate once that I don't know what planet he was on. Really, very little. I'd like to see fan mail.
Doesn't we all?
I don't have a question, just more to say you did a wonderful job of commenting on the times in a humorous way, both through the drawings and dialogue. And thank you. I'm sorry I never saw Murphy's Manor when it was published, although I guess you were in Ohio, so I probably wouldn't have seen it here in New York.
I'm glad you saw it now.
Do you have any collections that for purchase?
I have a self-published book that I did in about 1987 that has some of the early strips, and I really haven't done anything else. And If you're trying to lay a guilt trip on me, you might succeed.
No, your fans are clamoring. Self-publishing is easier than ever.
Yeah.
It's the distribution I'm worried about.
Yeah. Should have been in the workshop, but
Amazon is the great equalizer. Publish it, put it on Amazon, people can find it.
We might talk.
Yeah, we should. Next up is Roberta. I'm going to drive for her, so but you're going to have to turn around and look at what you're talking about. Are you ready to do this?
Cramping my neck. Okay, let's see if we got here. Okay, let's see. I think the first panel showed. Didn't I have the?
Oh, we're on slide 5.
Yeah.
There we go. Here
There we go.
No, we're back to slide 1
There's
where we meant to
Bitchy
start.
Okay, that was my sold out Bitchy Butch book that Fantagraphics published. It's a collection of everything. I'm trying to want to put them all online and maybe put some of the stories in the collection I want to do of all my stuff that nobody sees because it's been out of print for a long time. There's actually 3 issues of Naughty Bits through the comics on sale in the book room that have bitchy stories in them. One of them has a really good butchy story, so those are just available. Okay, though, so I was drawing comics ever since I was a little kid. Like my dad wrote for Disney, so we had all kinds of comics in the house. And there's like a little example of one of the little comics I drew with little talking animals and such. And yeah, I kind of, when I was getting to be a teenager, I started putting things like queer characters in my stories. I think I tried to do a superhero, and I had the supervillain who was kind of coming onto him. This is like back in the 60s. I mean, this is when, I am not going to let anybody see these. I mean, they're badly drawn, so that's one good thing is nobody. But I don't think most of them survived my many moves. But I kind of had my own unique sense of humor that. Like back then, I just thought it was weird because it was things you didn't talk about. But later on, people started talking about it. Let's see. So there's the next slide. There's actually a silly story I did. I had the Gustav Tengren illustrated Arabian Nights, which is beautiful. So I did like little satires of the stories of talking horses and dragons and things. So, and I think I have, there was the Beatles were big back then. So there's like a little Beatle joke in there. So that was stupid, but that's about what I was doing when I was 9 years old. So, yeah. Okay, next. What do we got? Okay, this is my Frida the Feminist script. Now, this dated from early 1974. I had the women's movement was just kind of starting, and there were a lot of insults that women dealt with, and one of them was that feminists had no sense of humor, and I had a sense of humor, and I thought there was all kinds of funny things about the feminist movement. So my strip was called Frida the Feminist, and the little strip that ran in the newsletter was called Feminist Funnies. And then this was like Phil Ye's, he's Mr. Cartoonist Across America. We were classmates at college, and he had a humor magazine. And in the Humor Women's Resource Center newsletter. Okay, and let's see. Next is this is a story I submitted to Women's Comics. Like I read comics, and they almost always seem to be done by men. And I think I'd seen some Marvel comics that had Maurice Severin, thinking, well, is that a woman or is that just like a French guy with a feminine-sounding name? You never know, but. When I was in college, actually, this would have been when I moved out of the dorms, I think. There were like head shops in my neighborhood, and they had comic books, and a lot of the comic books they had were things like women's comics, which were comics drawn by women that were like published, and people were buying them. And another thing that was really kind of cool is the women weren't really professional-looking artists. They didn't all draw in the Marvel style or the Archie style. And that was like really exciting because I was thinking, wow, my art isn't all that great, but I can tell stories. So this was supposed to have been a parody of a modern romance comic. The gal I was living with had gotten stoned one day when the magazine seller was coming by, and she had a subscription to like modern romance, which are these therapy stories about women who fell in love with the wrong guy and then regretted it and then met the right guy. And everything was, so I tried to do a parody of it, but it wasn't really, it just kind of seems like a corny story about coming out. So it's actually like my sort of least favorite story ever, and that's the one that keeps showing up in places.
Wouldn't you know?
Of course, yeah. I also kind of had this little stand-in character that kind of looked like me, so people thought it was autobio. I mean, not really. I mean, I didn't fall in love with the dykey, speak or whatever. Okay, next. So, okay, there's Dynamite Damsels. There's my comic book. I got really inspired to do my own comic book because some of the comics I was seeing were published by Nanny Goat Productions, which was Lynn Chevley and Joyce Farmer, who were living, the women's comics was like up in San Francisco, but they lived in Laguna Beach, which was just south of where I lived, and I got really excited about publishing my own comic because I did what I thought was the better story that I submitted to Women's Comics for issue number 5, and it got turned down. So that was like, okay, I don't like the way this is going. They can not publish my work if they don't want to. So I was thinking, well, if these women are publishing their own comic, I can do it too. So I think between Phil Ye, who was publishing magazines, and then Lynn Chevley and Joyce Farmer, I think I used the printer for the inside was somebody that Phil Ye used who didn't like my content and forbid me to ever publish another comic. But I pretty much spent every penny I had. I think back then it was like something like $750, I think, to print 10,000 copies. Back then that was like about the smallest press run you could do with comics.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, I'd be happy to have up under 10,000 anything. But, so it was like all hand-cut color, and it's all, let's see. I have like an overweight character who's trying to shop for clothes, and she can't find women's garments that fit, so she goes to the men's department. So it was just kind of dealing with funny, a funny look at issues that women deal with. Next. Let's see, what's that? Okay, then there's my Super Dyke character. Let's see, I wanted to have a lesbian character, and actually I think I even have like a Super Dyke t-shirt that I used to wear, so that was kind of fun. And I was thinking one time I think I drew probably about 20 or so more pages that were like huge, like Zipatone. I was going to do more stories, and they were just a little too serious. I didn't like them that much. I mean, they were kind of more serious than humorous, and maybe I'll put them in my collection of everything just so people can laugh at them. But I've got lots of pages of things. I actually drew another, I think I drew a sequel to Dynamite Damsels, and I think misplaced a lot of them, but there's still like about a dozen pages from that I never published. So I'm good at doing a lot of work that people think I have a lot of stuff out. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff that nobody's seen, but it's probably for the best. Like I say, maybe I'll put them in when somebody publishes my everything collection, I'll throw some of my bad, never seen by anybody stories in. Okay, next.
Forbidden Roberta.
Yeah. Okay, and then there's my story from Women's Comics number 7, which is kind of based on these two friends of mine who got busted for kissing behind a lesbian bar. So it's the latter side of being busted. So I kind of did like a humorous look at things. I had a theme of kind of doing a humorous look at things that a lot of people wouldn't think were funny, but I think if you're not rather laugh than crying anyway. So laughing's better. Next. See, what's that? Okay, there's a bondage story. Yeah, that was fun. That was in Tits and Clips. Became a anthology, and they seem to have in women's comics, because I guess fewer women were contributing to them, so I could do longer stories. So I did a lot of funny 1980 stories back then. Okay, next, what do we got here? Okay, here's a bisexual story about who are their college friends they meet, and they kind of, well, you've got to, they decide to kind of, that's from 1982. I don't know if people were bisexual stories. That was kind of funny. Okay, next death. I mean, I actually found I think too much alcohol and too many drugs. So I think actually before the story, I don't think I would have drawn the story. The paramedics come off and whatever, but that was, there actually was a lot of that going on in the community. It was about the only place you could. Well, actually, I pretty much drank for the first time ever. Draw the person looking drunk and, okay, how do you feel? And so I think it was screwdrivers. Because I was like, okay, orange juice and vodka, that sounds kind of safe. And for like 10 years later, I could not drink orange juice without. I mean, alcohol is still not my drug. I think I've got too much Indian in me or something. Alcohol just makes me ill. So, but you know, you do research. So, I'm seeing Alison Beck. Doing all of her research, get drunk. About all the research. Okay, next. Okay, and then here's my, but like I said, I got a story out of it. And that was actually kind of fun. It was, the whole story was kind of weird. It's kind of fantasy theme. With, and there's actually, in the story, lives in a funny fantasy story that was kind of, so I was kind of going, was doing operations like, you know, corns and stars and stuff back then. That was some of the art I was doing. So the stories I'm doing in gay comics kind of reflect what else is art. Okay, next. Okay, now there's artistic license. This was starting a porn comic, and see this little company, this which was their sequels, and then a small company, porno comic. They let's see, it was basically two creative people to their like creative and see, they're just not on the same plane at all. It's sad, but a lot of times people don't edit. It was a lot of kind of dealing with these sort of misunderstandings which people have, which isn't always funny. But I think so. Okay, what else? I keep forgetting what I put in here. Okay, let's see. Let's see, yeah, Kenny ends up having like fantasies about Denise and seeing them. So things go very, very, like again, you know, like violent fantasies aren't always funny to a lot of people, but I kind of think they are because, you know, people have a lot of stuff in their heads. Okay, next. What's that? Okay, this was hilarious. This was, let's see, I was working at Fantagraphics. I moved from LA. I'd been started before I actually moved. And I was spending this was in the olden days when they were publishing the complete Crumb, and I was in the darkroom shooting stats of all his work. Before everything, the digital age, I spent hours and hours and days in a darkroom with all these chemicals, which probably is not healthy for me. Doing pictures of Crumb's work, going, look at this, it's like violence against women. Why are people not protesting? Is it because this cute buddy did a cartoon like being violent against a guy and some goofy, screwy, you know, and if you compare that to artistic license, it looks nothing like my art style at all. And I thought, okay, this is kind of fun. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I think Kim said, why don't you do it? Which I thought was going to be one shot, so I called it Naughty Bits. And I think that was the lead story, and I got so much shit for that story. I mean, for like a few issues that Naughty Bits came out a few more issues. Then we had the art show in Seattle, and Crumb was there, and he was hard to figure out Crumb anyway. He was like, what? But like I say, it's hard to read Mr. Crumb. He's interesting character. I think the whole after that I was like the person who never next